G'day friends, family, fellow patriots. Lord Stompy here in Adelaide, South Australia. Welcome. Today we need to talk about feminized liberal democracies versus masculine authoritarian systems of governance. At this point in time, this is a crucial subject, and we really need to look at which system is better for long-term survival of a nation in the world. Now, there is really key reasons why the masculine authoritarian nations of the world, many of them are really beginning to pull together as nations and become really strong. And they're really making their mark on the world stage at the moment. So I'm talking about nations such as Russia and China. Whereas feminized liberal democracies, which is basically every Western nation that we live in, the very foundations of our culture are now crumbling under our feet. We are at the point of a massive existential crisis across the West. Now, ever since the end of World War II, we've been sold this idea that the more feminism, liberalism, freedom and democracy we have in our Western nations, the better that conditions will become. This has proven to be completely untrue. The more feminism, liberalism, freedom and democracy we've had, the more we've become fragmented as a people. And it has just now reached a point where we're at a crucial point where there is no turning back. We're just plunging into some abyss. Our nations are essentially, basically, most of the way to being destroyed, and soon we will be third world nations. So obviously, feminized liberal democracy isn't the key components for holding a nation together. And there's very real reasons for this, and we have to look at these key reasons with a clear mind, and we have to see these problems without the kind of female emotional hysteria that inevitably comes with having a good hard look at the way the world works. Now, it is a characteristic of women when they see the hardships and the woes and the trials and the tribulations of the world that they become very emotional. And this is fine. Women are just wired up this way. Women have always been the center of tribal life for tens of thousands of years. They are biologically wired up for intimate one-on-one contact, as well as working with very small groups of close, intimate associates. And the primary role of women for tens of thousands of years, they've been the nurturers and the caregivers. So they worry about the health and the safety of very small groups of people women are very close to the groups of people they worry about, and their job is the welfare of that small group of people. Men, on the other hand, for tens of thousands of years, we've always been the hunters and gatherers and the warriors. So we're biologically geared up for wandering about in the outer world, away from our tribe, and basically navigating and subduing a hostile environment. So over tens of thousands of years, this has created a very, very different biological mindset. This mindset in men and women is hardwired into us biologically. There is no getting around this. There is no amount of leveraging a nanny state to change the biological status of men and women. So, once again, women look after the health and safety of small groups of intimate familiars. That is their primary concern. Men defend and maintain the tribe and its homelands. That is their primary concern. So women are in charge of the micro. They have been for tens of thousands of years. Men are in charge of the macro, the greater good, the outer. That men look at the outer world, and men look at the greater good of the whole tribe. Women are concerned with the health and safety of individuals. And this is just the way we are biologically wired up. There is no getting around this. So, the problem is that in recent generations, basically there has been a massive movement throughout the West to create a more and more feminized version of liberal democracy. And this has been fatal to us as a people. Now, once again, this idea that getting more and more feminism and a more and more feminist worldview as the overarching views of our nations, this has always been pushed as being a really positive, good thing. And it's not. It's turned out to be the exact opposite. Having a feminized worldview as the guiding worldview of your nation is really, really toxic and pathological, because essentially the feminine view of the world is very, very short-sighted, and it's based around essentially caregiving and nurturing. And I've said this many times before on my channel, but one of the key aspects of feminized liberal democracy that we live in today is a kind of very, very destructive, self-destructive, pathological altruism. That is a key hallmark of the Western nations. That is why we have open borders, and we're flooding our Western nations with tens of millions of totally incompatible people. And I've said this in another video. Women essentially being the primary caregivers and nurturers, due to the fact that they're not wired up for managing entire nations and seeing the world as a dangerous place, and they're not wired up for seeing things with a pragmatic long-term view, is they don't actually even understand the danger of inviting tens of millions of completely foreign people with incompatible cultures into the center of our tribe. For tens of thousands of years, as men, it was our duty to defend the borders of our tribe from these people. This old-fashioned, traditional male view of the world has been completely overridden in the last few generations by feminized liberals. And it's been declared that the masculine view of the world as a hostile and dangerous place, that we have to defend our tribe. We have to. Men literally used to have to repel the hostile outside world away from our tribe, right? It was our job to push the dangerous outside world away. Men had to risk their safety and their lives taking on a hostile foreign outside world and preserving the integrity of our tribe. That was our job. If you see civilization as basically being a tortoise, men were the hard outside shell. The fighting men of a tribe were the hard outside shell of the tortoise. And they would take all the blows of the outside world to protect the soft underbelly of the tribe. Now, the soft underbelly is women and children. So in the last few generations, we've seen the rise of a feminized liberal version of democracy. And if we look over a long period of time, if we look at democracy, even from about 130 years ago, which isn't that long on a timeline, democracy here in the West 130 years ago wasn't at all feminized. Our ancestors of that era made sure that democracy was very strong and masculine. And it wasn't just democracy. There's a lot of criticism these days about Christianity being a very cucked religion. Now, in the modern world, there is some truth in this claim. And as a Christian myself, I pull my hair out at times at the utterly effeminate state of most Christians today. Right? But our ancestors from 130 years ago, they had a much more masculine and muscular version of democracy and Christianity. Right? Our men from 130 years ago were still world conquerors. They were Christians. Many of them were democratic, and they were conquering the world still. This was 130 years ago was still a really high point of the British Empire. So these were democratic Christian fighting men. So fighting men were in charge of democracy. Fighting men were in charge of Christianity. And our civilization, our Western civilization, was really strong. It had been really, really strong for over 1,000 years. In fact, we were unbeatable when we're a masculine culture. So masculine cultures are inherently more oppressive. And in this case, feminists do have this right. Men don't fuck about. Right? We tend not to play games too much. Men will play games up to a point and then things get serious. And then we just don't fuck about. And the reason why is because we understand in the very core of our being danger and what it means. We understand the threats that danger will have, we understand existential threats and the effects that they can have on the safety and well-being and the integrity of our nations and our tribes. Women don't fully understand this. Now, to make my point clear, put your hand up if you've been in some situation where things suddenly get violent. Now, I've been in those situations quite often. And if you have real masculine men, not these modern soy boys, but if you have old-fashioned masculine men, when things start to get violent in a public sphere, what happens is the men all jump up on their feet, ready to defend themselves and their partners or their families. And if things get really out of hand and people are getting hurt and there's a lot of blows being traded, the women will run around going crazy, pulling their hair, going, "Oh my God, oh my God." So women completely lose their mind. Most women, when faced with real existential danger, just completely lose their mind. They're not biologically wired up to deal with it. Whereas the average masculine man will jump up on their feet and be like, right, I have to defend myself, I have to defend my woman. So a man will become adrenalized, but they will also remain fairly clear-minded about what needs to be done. Right, whereas the women just become hysterical and highly emotional. So this essentially is the difference in the biological reality between men and women. Now, just to hammer home this point even more, I'm going to say here, about 2 years ago, I was driving in a car. I was in a car with a Liberal woman driving. We were driving down a main road, and suddenly, without warning, a huge gang brawl of violent abos spilled out into the main road. So the woman who was driving, she slammed on the brakes while I'm sitting there, and she completely stopped the car. And meanwhile, there was these violent abos beating the hell out of each other. There was about 25 of them. So our car was suddenly surrounded by a gang brawl of violent abos at night. And I was saying to this woman, just start pushing through this crowd. I said, these guys will start smashing your car. I was like, lock your door. I mean, they'll pull you out the car and beat you up, and maybe even try to rape you. I mean, this is a gang brawl of wild savages, woman. And the woman was sitting there holding the steering wheel going, oh my God, I might hurt one of them. I might run one of them over. And I'm like going, good, we just need to get out of here. We are sitting in the middle of danger. Now, the woman's only instinct was, if she began to put her foot on the accelerator and began to push through the crowd, she might hurt someone. She was actually panicking. And me as a man, I was like, oh my God, we're in danger. We need to escape. Just push through. Never mind if we hurt them. Get out of here so that we're safe. So this is the difference between men and women. Now, we have been sold a lie ever since the end of World War II that the more feminism, the more freedom, the more liberalism, and the more democracy we have, the better things will get. And the thing is now we have a very large degree of feminine control over our culture, and we are being run by people who are ruled by emotions and hysteria. Literally, when you have all these people criticizing soy boys and feminists and liberals and gays and all these people, if you boil this down, the problem is all these people that you're complaining about, all these feminists, liberals, soy boys, faggots, they literally run on emotions and hysteria. They have no broad worldview. They have no concept of existential danger. They have no long-term strategy of where our society is at now and where it's going to go in the future. And this is just a biological fact of life, that women and feminized men just aren't biologically wired up to be in charge of anything. And if we go back to our democracy of 130 years ago, women weren't allowed to vote in the vast majority of Western nations. And this was specifically done by men to protect the interests of their nations. All right? Nowadays, women, our effeminate liberal democracy that we have now, it is so feminized that the only reason they can come up with that the men of the past wouldn't allow women to vote, and they wouldn't allow low-tier irresponsible men to vote. There was a time, and it was around about 100 years ago and further back than that, when only responsible, intelligent men were allowed to vote, right? And Western society was doing really well, right? Only responsible, intelligent men were allowed to vote. If you're a man and you're below a certain level of social status, you weren't allowed to vote. And there was reasons for that, right? And there was reasons that women weren't allowed to vote. So our feminized liberal democracy now, the only takeaway they can have is, oh, those men back then were oppressive. Well, that is partly true, but the problem is feminized liberals. That's the only reason they can think of that the old-fashioned society was wired up that way. And then they just get emotional and hysterical. And they completely miss out on the fact that the responsible men that ran society wanted to make sure that only responsible men had a say in how society was run, because they understood the danger of allowing women and irresponsible men to get in charge of an entire civilization. And that is exactly what has happened to us now. And now you look around and you see the end result of it. Is it good? Is our Western civilization now better than it was 130 years ago, or worse? Right? Are we heading in a better trajectory now? Or are we heading downhill? This is pretty easy to see which way we're headed. Right? And as a big part of this is the reasons that I've just explained to you. So, yeah, it is true that masculine authoritarian systems of government are, in general, more oppressive. And there's reasons for this. The responsible men in a society actually need to keep control of the irresponsible men and the women. Right? It is the responsible men of society, of a civilization, have a duty of care to the irresponsible men and the women. Right? And if you give the irresponsible men and women, if you let them get in charge of civilization, they don't actually know how to look after themselves, let alone a civilization. It's just the way life works. And this is why, over a long span of time, a masculine authoritarian system will survive, even if there is very limited freedoms for the people under the rule. I mean, look at a really barbaric country like Afghanistan. They've been under one of the most barbaric masculine authoritarian systems of governance in history, and they've been like that forever. And yet their nation, as backwards and as oppressive as it is, has continued to hold together for well over 1,000 years. And believe me, many great strong nations have tried to invade Afghanistan, and none of them have ever succeeded. So think about that, as we are now being invaded due to the fact that women and feminized men have decided that we should have open border policies for the West. Right? This has been the executive decision made by women and immature men on behalf of the West. We'll just open our borders to all the incompatible hordes of the world. Invite all the pagan hordes of the world into the West, and everyone will live together in peace and harmony. Right? Whereas, if you look at a really backwards country like Afghanistan, sure, there's a lot of very bad things about living there, but their own people and their own culture and their own nation, that's if you are an Afghani person, that culture theoretically, if it just keeps its backwards system of governance that it has now, it could hold together for another 3,000 or 4,000 years. Right? Let's face it, over time, even in modern era, the Soviet Union tried to invade them and pin them down. They couldn't do it. America tried to invade them and pin them down. These were the two greatest world powers of the modern era. The Soviet Union and the Americans failed to hold them down. And these were a backwards bunch of guys with very low technology. And the Soviet Union and the Americans both went in there with with much more high level modern technology, and they couldn't pin these guys down. They couldn't hold them down. It's simply because the Afghanis were under a very, very muscular, obnoxious, masculine system of governance that totally refused to bend their will to any foreign influence, to any foreign infiltration. And the men of that nation just made sure that any foreign infiltration was repelled. And the Afghanis, you can laugh at them all you like about them being backwards, but man, they are brave as lions, and just they're brutal as a pack of hyenas. There's no doubt about it, right? You can make fun of them for being backwards while you're sitting in the comfortable West, but if you were in their nation, you would be showing them a lot of respect, man. Right? That is the hallmark of a genuine masculine authoritarian culture. If you're in their country and you're a visitor there, you show them a lot of respect, because you are afraid of consequences. Right, so that's all I've got to say on that. Just think about that, though. If you are, any genuine masculine authoritarian culture, any outsider that goes to visit their culture, they're on their best behavior, because whether they like it or